This is Product Management, the podcast powered by Alpha. Welcome. We feature the brightest minds across the numerous disciplines that fuel modern product teams. Join over 15,000 weekly listeners to learn from product leaders, authors, and founders from companies such as Adobe, Shopify, Viacom, Under Armour, and many more. They'll share their insights and best practices for experimentation, user research, leadership, corporate innovation, and more. To receive updates on the latest episodes of this show, subscribe to our weekly newsletter at thisisproductmanagement.com. To learn more about Alpha, the platform that has powered thousands of product experiments for the world's leading brands, visit alphahq.com.
Hey, I'm your host, Mike Fishbein. Welcome back. On this episode, I'll be speaking with Tarah Seshan, product manager at Stripe, the leading online payment processing company. She led the launch of Stripe Billing, the company's new subscription payments product. Tarah will share how customer interviews informed her product roadmap, how she makes strategic decisions, and how to apply product management thinking to monetization and billing.
I'm Tarah Seshan. I work at Stripe to help recurring businesses grow faster, specifically on a product called Stripe Billing. Software as a service is an amazing billing and really delivery model for software, which is incredibly superior to what traditional method of selling software licenses, in that, businesses restructure around software as a service. And so around SaaS, there has become this, distinct body of practice. But either many entrepreneurs or businesses discover this too late, or they discover it the hard way by making mistakes that have really been made before, rather than spending their time on newer, better mistakes to grow their business faster. So I'm here to talk about how to build products to help SaaS businesses grow faster, sort of the importance of recurring revenue and pricing being treated as a product, and how we can enable businesses to grow via the best knowledge we have so that they can go on to build new business models.
Tarah led the launch of Stripe's new product, Stripe Billing, to help software as a service companies with subscription payments. How did she get started in product?
I'm a founder who turned into a product manager. I got my start working on a bunch of different ideas in digital health specifically, and ended up probably most notably working on a startup called Better that enabled patients to hire personal health assistants to handle the administrative parts of care so that they could focus on getting well. That business actually charged on a recurring basis, and we used Stripe's subscriptions API to do so. And when I first came to Stripe, I actually didn't come trying to be a PM. I came with all kinds of feature requests for the subscriptions product, and I had a lot of tips that I really wanted Stripe to build so that my company could grow quicker. Ultimately, at that point, Stripe was a lot smaller and we didn't even have PMs. And so Stripe's product as a whole is focused on growing the GDP of the internet. How can we give businesses tools all the way from large companies that are big public companies looking to scale faster versus even tiny startups who are just looking to get started. And so in my time at Stripe, what I really worked on is most of the applications layer of Stripe. So not just the core payments API, but everything from Radar, our fraud prevention tool, to Connect, our marketplace enablement tool, and now billing. In my 3.5 years at Stripe, we've grown pretty significantly. I joined when we were on sort of the order of hundreds, and now we are in thousands. But ultimately, I get to most lately work on some of the things that most excite me, helping SaaS businesses specifically.
Tarah used Stripe while running the startup that she founded. She then joined the company on its mission to grow the GDP of the internet, bringing a number of feature requests with her. I asked Tarah how the idea for Stripe Billing came about.
So one of the broader trends that I think everybody's talking about these days is how monetization models on the internet sometimes been ad-based models. And really the trend here is moving from models where you're monetizing based on ads to a world where you ultimately pay for stuff directly. The consumer, the person who's using the product, is also the customer, and they're either paying for it directly, the concept of a multi-sided marketplace where they're paying for the ride or paying for the grocery delivery, or, increasingly through subscriptions. Recurring revenue businesses are some of the most enduring kind of internet successes, like a Salesforce, for example. All of these businesses have been recurring revenue for a long time. But they're not only becoming more prevalent, but they're also becoming more complex. Like with the rise of SaaS, like instead of paying for licenses, people pay for things in all kinds of crazy ways. There's been a Cambrian explosion of sorts of internet business models, and they're really hard to implement. Everyone from Dropbox to Spotify to Twilio are part of this kind of growing wave of new SaaS, and all of them have really different business models and oftentimes different tools they need to enable those business models to be possible. And at Stripe, we're lucky to have a front row seat to a lot of that growth. And there are a lot of users of Stripe, like a Slack, for example, that implemented a new and really fascinating way of billing for SaaS. But even with the most amazing, sophisticated, technically adept teams, like managing recurring billing for SaaS companies is often really the slowest part of taking something to market. Like when you think about a SaaS company versus maybe a marketplace, SaaS companies don't have to, set up driver operations in a new country or like spend a lot of time working through office sites and like onboarding tons of people with local regulations. But instead, going international with software oftentimes is like language localization and flipping a bit. But really the hardest part about this is often billing. And that's kind of the limiting reagent sort of to getting things out faster. We built billing to ultimately help these companies. How can Stripe roll out tools to help companies design new business models and take care of kind of 98% of that complexity so they can focus on the parts that really differentiate them? And we've done similar things to the point of product strategy with a lot of our other products in the suite. So with Stripe Elements, which is our pre-built hosted fields for credit card numbers, we did a lot of the stuff that might be super complicated that all businesses end up having to re-implement, like instrumenting the page for fraud protection or doing validation on the card number. And what we left businesses to do is, customize that field for their own UI, customize it based on their own preferences. And I think that's a trend across all of Stripe's products and a lot of our product strategy. How can we create like sort of building blocks for the internet in a way that enable companies to grow much quicker than they would have before?
Tarah and her team noticed a shift from advertising-supported business models to subscription models, where the end user pays for the product. They then discovered that businesses had a number of pain points in implementing such a model. What were the first steps Tarah took to bring a solution to market?
One of the most difficult parts about getting a project like this started is just the vast market that you could potentially serve and all the different types of users. I spoke about kind of a Cambrian explosion of business models. There's a lot of different business models that we could have potentially addressed here and a lot of different sizes and types of users. So one of the very specific things we did to start was do a bunch of user interviews. Can we really understand what the core problems are here? Like, do a lot of businesses have problems in common? Like, what is it that they're truly looking to do? And one of the most interesting things we discovered, I think, is that we went in with the assumption that the challenge here was on the finance side. Like, is the challenge to get all of these tools to fit in with whatever financial structure you have? Is it about, doing revenue recognition faster or something? In actuality, I think what we saw was that most of these companies, their biggest problem is not just staying ahead of revenue recognition, but it's actually how can they tie pricing and billing to their product experience? How can they make pricing a product? Where finance is an incredibly important stakeholder, but product management or engineering or design are also really important stakeholders in crafting the best experience for users. So we saw that, strategic companies think of pricing for the product as inextricable from where in the product experience do users derive value. And they ultimately treat that monetization model as a product or even UX decision, in addition to kind of deeply examining those finance components. So once we kind of hit on that insight, it was much easier to start forming the roadmap. Like ultimately, what do we want to build? What do we want to be the value that users get from this solution? I think that's like an interesting attribute of Stripe as a whole in terms of who is the user here. And Stripe has such a large and sort of diverse user base. Again, everyone from large public companies who have very different goals from, a startup that just got out of Y Combinator who's looking to get started. So there's a pretty wide swath of not only people already on Stripe, but potential users that might take advantage of this product. In terms of our focus, what we wanted to do was double down on companies that are like either facing a big growth inflection point in terms of SaaS or a little smaller, with ultimately the idea of, everyone maybe needs recurring billing, but it's those companies, the companies at the growth stage and startup stage, who are at the point to implement new billing systems very quickly. And over time, we'll work with enterprise companies, and it takes a while for them to, rip out their billing system and add a new one. But on the growth stage, really what this looks like to me is a company that has already probably passed like a million in MRR. And what they're thinking is, wow, our processes aren't scaling, or we have this core product and now we're launching new business lines. And oh boy, is billing difficult for these new business lines, because the way we want to monetize this new business line is in a crazy new way from what we did originally. And it's at that point where wow, having someone do this manually really doesn't scale. And that person's so smart and awesome. It's probably not the best use of their time to manually invoice or manually retry all of these charges that might be failing. So I think that is key user that we really had in mind as we were building this whole product.
Interviewing users helped Tarah discover the customer segments with the most acute need for Stripe billing, and which users within those organizations to initially focus on. How did those insights inform the product roadmap?
In terms of how we think about road mapping at Stripe broadly, some of the things we learned from this specific process with billing have really made it into how Stripe thinks about product planning in general. So one of the core principles that we realized with billing is that at a fast-growing company, one of the biggest challenges with product planning is not, are we picking something that's valuable for the business, but what's the opportunity cost of picking this versus another thing? There are so many different ways that businesses can go. There's so many different potential opportunities that present themselves to a business like Stripe, for an example. But the real question is this the best thing for us to be doing in 2018? Is this the most valuable way we could be spending our time and our resources? Our users are growing so fast, the company's growing fast. Investments we make now really have deep influence on what we do later. So the question is not only why is this the right thing to do and defining that on the roadmap, but also why now? What is the urgency here? Why does this have to happen in this month or in this year as opposed to next year? So this is something that's in all of our PRDs more broadly now. So you have to really justify not only is this an investment that Stripe should make eventually, but why should Stripe make this investment today rather than 2 years from now? In terms of metrics specifically that we look at to determine if something's urgent, that often varies with the type of project that it is. Is it specifically a new revenue generating project in which it's about potentially revenue? But really, I think the key thing that we look at is, are we sort of addressing a new use case or a new segment of users that we're prepared to bet on? In this case, with this product, we're opening the door for SaaS businesses to really have a product that was built for them. And are we willing to bet on SaaS businesses as a huge part of what ultimately it means to kind of increase the GDP of the internet? And I think the justification for building billing now rather than later was, we believe in SaaS. We want SaaS to grow very, very quickly. And we noticed that with this new wave of SaaS happening now, this is the right point to ensure that businesses have these tools. This is where the wave is about to crest, and we want to make sure that we are powering that wave. So for billing specifically, the urgency really came from what we saw in the market and understanding, wow, this is a really important segment for the internet as a whole, and how can Stripe help that move faster?
By focusing on opportunities that align with the long-term vision of the company, while also having the most significant impact in the short term, Tarah prioritized key features for the initial version of Stripe billing. I asked her how she executed the launch in the midst of Stripe's rapid growth.
We're at this point where we're still growing really, really fast. New functions, new roles are even emerging every few months. And so in terms of stakeholder management, I think every PM course faces the challenge of ensuring that all of their stakeholders on board. But in a company that's growing really quickly, it's your stakeholders from the time that you begin the project. There might be 4 new roles that have emerged in the company that are now stakeholders in your project going forward. So I think one of the most important things a PM can do is be really strategic about how we're driving towards decisions, ensure that we're like spending our time on the right decisions. And one of the most helpful frameworks that I found is that like that Jeff Bezos framework of is the type of decision that's like a trapdoor decision, in which case, spend a lot of time and make sure that everybody is on board with exactly what you're doing versus a decision that's easily reversed, in which case we can like make a reasonable assumption and move forward. And I think that's often a challenge at a company that's growing quickly with a lot of stakeholders, which is what do you spend their time on and what is important for sign up? What do we need to spend a lot of brain space on and ensure that we think a ton about versus decisions where we should make them fairly quickly and focus our energy on getting good as a company on making those decisions quickly. And of course, the most important things that go with that framework are over time, we need to be really ready to iterate. So if it happens that you made the wrong decision on one of those reversible decisions, be able to reverse it quickly. On the stakeholder side, it's how do you not only, I think you bring people in as and when they need to be brought in, but really the key here is all of these people's time is so valuable. There are so many different things that they are responsible for or working on. And so how do you ensure you spend it on the right things? And to me, that is spending it on those decisions that are trapdoor, that are super important to get right the first time.
Citing Jeff Bezos, Tarah distinguishes between permanent and reversible decisions. She brings in key stakeholders for decisions that are important and not easily reversible. How are customers using Stripe billing to power their recurring revenue products?
So the product launched about a month ago. We have thoughts from users who have either used it over the past few months in beta and early testers, as well as people who've adopted it since. And I think one of the most interesting results for companies, I spoke about how billing used to be kind of the limiting reagent for users actually getting their SaaS product to market. What we've seen is some users like Eero, they launched subscription billing in less than 2 weeks with 2 developers working on it, which is pretty unheard of. Usually, it's these like 6-month long projects to make sure that everything is integrated, or even longer, these like heavy lift projects where you're getting sort of external consulting teams to come in and help you implement. So 2 weeks for all of subscription billing with 2 developers is a result that we want to make possible for more and more and more of our users. In terms of some of the like unique value add tools that we have, one of the things that we heard from customers was, hey, we're like spending all this time trying to figure out things like when we retry cards, trying to figure out ways that we can earn more revenue, trying to figure out how to increase our LTV, but we don't necessarily have the right tools to do so. And one of the things that we built as a part of this launch was smart recovery. So what Stripe does here is we train machine learning models using a lot of the data across the Stripe network, whether that's the number of times we've seen a card in the past hour be successfully charged, or attributes of a business, or really global trends on how chargers are functioning. And what we do using those models is actually predict the exact right time to retry a card for success. Or we, contact the card network, see that a card is about to expire and get the latest version for you. So with all of these tools, what we did for a company like Bench, which, is SaaS accounting tools, is we help them recover 12% more revenue with this product specifically. It's an example of we really listened to what our users' problems are, and maybe the solution was one that they wouldn't have necessarily thought of. But with a lot of the data we have at Stripe and the insights across our payments product, we're able to come up with creative ways that ultimately, again, should help a business earn more revenue and really save their time, because their time is so much more valuably spent on some of the things that differentiate them as a business. One of the interesting things we learned with building billing was kind of this principle of like more things should be a product, if that makes sense. And even just thinking about how Stripe has continued to scale, that's bringing in PMs to lend expertise of like, how can something that might have been thought of as like a one-off decision ultimately be thought of as really like a strategic product decision in order to better serve users, and ultimately always comes back to users. So what we learned with billing was that oftentimes people would love to consider pricing to be a product decision that has lots of different stakeholders across the organization, like finance, like operations, but really a decision where the question is about user experience and how we help users find value and see value. And I think applying product thinking to more and more problems has been an exciting way for not only Stripe to see opportunity, but I think for a lot of companies to see a lot of new opportunity. Our users would like to think of their own pricing and their own billing as product decisions as well. that ultimately when you're building a new product and you want to, value is added by adding additional users, that ultimately you want to charge the same way that value is added. And knowing where that value is, knowing why this product is important to users is oftentimes a product engineering, a design really decision. And then making a monetization model that works with where people derive value in the product should really be the way that they're thinking about it, as opposed to fitting in old school monetization models for like brand new types of products that we're developing. As the internet sort of is a catalyst for all these new types of products, new ways of deriving value, as people dream up like new innovations, monetization models should follow that and should scale with that. And we found our users kind of struggling to fit those two things together. It was either use sort of an old school monetization model or build it all yourself. And so what we saw was, we thought the problem was, hey, how do you handle the operations of billing? And it turned out to be, okay, the problem is, how do you align billing with product? And I think there are tons more opportunities to do exactly that across many different industries. There's an example of maybe a user that comes to mind who used this in beta, was Meetup. I think most people are familiar with Meetup. They have like an online tool for you to get together with different groups around interests. And people are used to thinking of Meetup as not necessarily like a monetized tool, something that like you can use, and perhaps there was like another monetization model that they were thinking of. But with Meetup, they started launching a paid model because users were deriving value. They wanted to turn their users into customers and launched a paid model. And with some of the tools that they had with billing for kind of flexibility, experimentation, aligning the product experience with the pricing experience, they were actually able to like increase free to paid trial conversions by 300%. Actually, it was crazy. There's a lot of like revenue to be added, quite frankly, but also just user experience, goodwill, and karma to be obtained by making sure that you're only billing where users add value. Another company that I love to mention in this case is like Metro Mile. They do car insurance based on when you use your car or how much you actually drive. And I think that's a broader trend that's happening across internet businesses as a whole, because the internet makes these kind of things possible, where ultimately you're not going to just charge a flat amount. You're going to really charge based on value and where users see value. And you need tools to make that easier. You can't build it yourself from scratch every time.
Tarah sees tremendous opportunity in applying product thinking to pricing and monetizing based on how users derive value from the product. She highlights how this approach helped Meetup increase free to paid trial conversions by 300%. I asked Tarah how the product organization at Stripe has changed since she first joined the company.
In particular, the product management organization has seen a pretty big change since I joined Stripe to now. And ultimately, that's really based on the fact that our user base has also changed pretty significantly from 3.5 years ago to now. When Stripe started, really, Stripe was our users. Ultimately, it was John and Patrick Collison integrating Stripe for other people in their YC class, and they were the users. They could definitely empathize with the users. Empathy for users and understanding their problems to then build the right product really wasn't our problem. But as Stripe continued to grow, we moved up market. We started to serve larger and larger users, organizations where like a media organization where developers are a sort of a smaller department in comparison to their core product and core competency. As we continue to grow and serve larger and larger and larger companies, we realized that we actually didn't even understand necessarily our users' problems. And we needed a function in the company whose job it was to understand user problems, translate those user problems into what is our strategy, digest their feedback, and then ultimately make it into a strategic choice for what we want to build. And then, as we added more functions, added more roles in the company, ultimately it's coordination across all of these roles and getting input from all of these roles to ensure that we're making the right decisions. And that really was, okay, Stripe needs product management. And so when I started, we didn't have PMs. Now we have a pretty robust PM team and are, of course, always hiring. We need more product managers here at Stripe. And that's been a pretty incredible change to see an organization where we talk to our users all the time, even then, but it was engineers with one-off users on GChat to now having product managers who are always reaching out to users to do research or interviews, building product strategies, and ultimately, I think, delivering a better product even as our user base continues to grow.
Tarah shared excellent advice for product teams working on subscription revenue business models and launching new products. Distinguish between permanent and reversible decisions, translate customer insights into a long-term strategy, and build the products and features that will have the most significant impact. Next up is the benchmark. Let's hear how Tarah reflects on the next series of questions we ask all interviewees to ask themselves.
Yeah, a resource I'd recommend, to learn more about launching products or even thinking about product strategy is actually Ben Thompson's email list and blog Stratechery, to the point of why are we building this? How does this fit into the landscape? And again, why now as being the crucial questions for a product manager to answer. I think Stratechery provides a great precedent for that kind of strategic thinking and is a good template for product managers to use when trying to either make the case for their product or create urgency around their product. So when I started at Stripe, one of the best ways to get out of the office and really learn what customers want is actually to do sales. When I started at the company, we didn't have salespeople. Everyone kind of did sales. And to that point, I also tried my hand at sales. And after, responding to users you never knew before, cold calling, trying sales, ultimately, you really lose a lot of your fear in talking to users, understanding users, being frank with users. So that was one of the most valuable experiences I had for learning how to get out of the office. One of the things I'm listening to right now, one of my favorite podcasts actually, is Econ Talk with Russ Roberts. I love Econ Talk. It's a great podcast. Russ takes you on a journey of learning not only a lot of different things about econ, but he sort of applies his econ lens, his kind of love of Adam Smith to a lot of different topics, whether that's, the opioid crisis or Buddhism, or he's made an animated movie about the invisible hand. I think a great way to continue learning, a great way of applying a specific lens to lots of different disciplines. One of my favorite products that I've heard of, not only outside of work, but they're also a Stripe user, is PillPack. So PillPack actually makes the user experience around taking medications much better. So, of course, medication adherence is one of the biggest problems in healthcare and causes of wasted money, outcomes going not the sort of way they should be. And what PillPack does is, for folks like my grandma who are taking 6 different pills every day, they actually put all of the pills into a specific packet of exactly what you're taking each day. So she has her Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not something that she has to put in herself in a pill box, but they give it to her just like that. And I think it speaks to how just simple user experience changes can make a huge difference, make a huge impact, ultimately, in this case, on patients' lives and health.
Listeners can learn more about Stripe billing at stripe.com/billing. Find out about job opportunities at Stripe at stripe.com/jobs. And connect with Tarah on Twitter at TarStar. That's at TarStarr. That's our show. Until next time, this is Mike Fishbein from Alpha. If you enjoy the show, I encourage you to go beyond iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud and subscribe on our website, thisisproductmanagement.com. Every Monday, you'll get an email from me with the latest episode, exclusive product management resources, discounts to conferences, and opportunities to ask future guests a question that will be aired on the show. Visit thisisproductmanagement.com to subscribe.